The room held its breath. Even the air seemed to stiffen as the captain's hand trembled against the side of her skull, the pistol cold and impatient. Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss didn't move. She didn't plead or flinch. Her gaze stayed locked somewhere beyond him. On the window, on the horizon, on a memory only she knew. The kind of stillness she carried wasn't born of bravery. It was the quiet that comes from someone who's already walked through worse fires and learned to stop fearing the smoke. The captain's voice cracked under the weight of his own command. "Say something," he hissed, his words too sharp, his control too thin. Around them, the briefing room froze. Junior officers caught between duty and disbelief, watching a storm build in silence. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. The barrel twitched. Mara finally exhaled, slow and deliberate, the kind of breath that sounds more like a choice than a reflex. "If you're going to pull it," she said, voice level, almost kind, "do it clean." The words landed heavier than the weapon. A pause followed, an elastic second where time forgot how to move. The hum of fluorescent lights turned into a pulse. Her calm wasn't defiance. It was dominance disguised as peace. Every soldier in that room felt the shift. The moment control changed hands without a single motion. Then the silence stretched, long and taut, as if daring the trigger to test it. For the first time, he saw what everyone else already knew. This wasn't a woman you threatened. This was a woman who decided who walked away. The frame froze on her face, breathing steady, eyes unreadable, and the sound of that single, measured breath was louder than any gunshot could ever be. When Mara Voss first arrived at Fort Ashland, she carried no introduction louder than the rhythm of her boots. No entourage, no speeches, just a single duffel, a folder of classified exercises, and the kind of posture that spoke of someone who'd rather earn respect than request it. The facility was a patchwork of Navy precision and Army bravado, a place where rank mattered more than reason and the smell of competition hung thicker than coffee. She was there on a temporary assignment, brought in to train a cross-branch unit on crisis response drills. To her, it was just another rotation. To them, it was a test they didn't know they were about to fail. Captain Riggs noticed her before she even spoke. His command presence filled rooms the way noise fills silence. Impressive until you start listening closely. To him, a seal in his house was an intrusion, a mirror held up too close. When Mara walked into the strategy briefing and began scanning the wall maps, he leaned back, waiting for her to misstep. She didn't. Instead, when he presented his emergency extraction plan, she raised a quiet hand and said, "Sir, your secondary route crosses open terrain within range of simulated hostiles. You'll lose 3 people before extraction even begins." The room fell silent, half of it watching him, the other half watching her. Riggs' smile was tight, rehearsed. "Appreciate the input, Chief, but we've run these drills before." Mara nodded once. "And that's why you keep losing them, sir." There was no malice in her tone, no sharpness, just data delivered with calm precision. That made it worse. The younger soldiers smirked behind their notebooks, and for the first time, Riggs' authority felt negotiable. He ended the briefing early, his voice clipped, his pride leaking through every syllable. Later, as she walked past the training yard, she could feel the eyes that followed her, some curious, some resentful. She ignored them all. The work would speak for itself, it always did. But somewhere behind those barracks walls, a fuse had already been lit. The kind that doesn't burn fast, but always, inevitably, finds the barrel. Mara's version of training didn't look like war. It looked like waiting. She'd take her recruits into the hangar before sunrise. No weapons, no shouts, no orders barked through megaphones. Just silence. She'd pace between them slowly, tapping her boot once to mark the rhythm of breath, the tempo of thought. "Listen to what you can't hear," she'd say. The moment before noise. That's where control lives. Most of them didn't understand at first. Soldiers were trained to act, not to wait. But Mara was teaching something older, something quieter, the art of owning time. One morning, she told them a story without naming when or where. A hostage rescue, a room full of chaos, a single heartbeat too loud. She'd walked into that room unarmed, and when the gunman's hand trembled, she didn't flinch. She watched the pulse in his throat, the tightening of his jaw, then moved. One motion, one breath. He was on the floor before he knew he'd fallen. "Panic is permission," she told them. Control is command. It became her mantra, whispered among the recruits like scripture, half myth, half survival code. The base began to divide around her. Some of the younger officers started mirroring her stillness, learning to wait before reacting, to breathe before speaking. Others mocked it, calling it Zen warfare, saying she belonged in a monastery, not a battlefield. Captain Riggs heard both sides and decided he didn't like either. To him, her silence wasn't wisdom. It was a challenge he hadn't issued. Every calm look she gave, every clipped, polite correction felt like a reminder that she saw through him. In the mess hall, the talk was that Chief Voss could end a fight before it began, that she knew things nobody taught anymore. Riggs laughed it off, but the laughter never reached his eyes. Power, he thought, should be loud. And whatever she was doing, it was too quiet to control. The morning of the joint drill began like any other. Routine, structured, predictable. Mara moved through the staging area checking safety locks, comms, and exit markers, her calm presence a quiet constant amid the hum of engines. Captain Riggs was already on site, barking orders through a radio, his tone sharp with impatience. The exercise was supposed to simulate an urban extraction, but he had modified the plan overnight, pushing for a more aggressive timeline. She saw the flaw instantly, a live vehicle maneuver too close to the mock perimeter, one misstep away from a collision. Hold position, she called out, voice steady but firm. Riggs turned toward her, frowning. You don't countermand my order, Chief. There's a recruit in the blind zone, sir. Move that Humvee and you'll crush him. For a fraction of a second, he hesitated. Then the rumble of the engine drowned everything out. Mara sprinted forward, slammed her palm on the hood, and yanked the trainee clear just as the tires scraped the edge of his vest. Dust exploded around them. The field went dead silent. The recruit stared at her in disbelief. The others stared at Riggs. She dusted off her sleeves and looked at him. Drill secured, Captain. His jaw worked, no words forming, just the raw shape of humiliation. You're relieved, he managed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Insubordination. Effective immediately. No one moved. The silence stretched too long. Mara nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement of a truth he couldn't bear. She'd saved his soldier from his mistake. That night, under the low hum of the fluorescent lights, he summoned her to the operations room. The space was empty except for a table, 2 chairs, and a single bottle half-drained beside his files. His eyes were glassy, but his voice tried to stay sharp. You embarrassed me in front of my unit, he said. That's not something we recover from. She didn't respond. She simply folded her arms and waited. He slammed the sidearm onto the table, the sound cracking the air. Say something, he demanded. Still nothing. The silence pressed on him, heavy, merciless. He stood, grabbed the weapon, and in one drunken, reckless motion, pressed it to her temple. The room froze. Her pulse didn't. That calm breath returned, slow, deliberate, the sound of someone who had already decided how this would end. The sound of metal against skin always tells the truth. It trembles when the hand behind it doesn't believe in what it's doing. Riggs's fingers were shaking now, too much adrenaline, too little control. Mara didn't move for a heartbeat. Then, as if the silence itself had given her permission, she tilted her head a fraction to the left. The barrel slid along her temple, grazing but no longer aligned. His balance shifted with it, weight leaning forward just enough. She caught that moment, the microsecond when force becomes vulnerability, and used it. Her left hand came up not to grab, but to guide, redirecting the weapon's arc as her right hand snapped the slide. The motion was precise, almost surgical. A sharp click. A pivot. The sidearm was no longer his. By the time his eyes caught up with what had happened, the magazine clattered onto the table and the chambered round landed beside it. She locked the slide open, placed the weapon gently in front of him, and stepped back. It had taken less than 2 seconds. Her breathing hadn't changed. Riggs, though, was pale, chest heaving, the weight of what just happened dawning too slowly to stop the humiliation from spreading across his face. The silence between them was electric now, not fear, not threat, but truth made visible. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. That would have made it small. Instead, she met his eyes with that same unblinking calm. Now, she said, voice quiet but firm, you're unarmed. Shall we discuss command? He swallowed hard, words failing him completely. The barrel of his authority lay on the table between them, emptied, harmless, reduced to parts. For the first time since her arrival, there was no doubt who led this room. She turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to let the silence finish what she started. Outside, the corridor felt colder, cleaner. Control wasn't about taking power. It was about refusing to let anyone else define it. And in that small, perfect reversal, every lesson she'd ever taught had just been proven true. By morning, the story had already begun to spread. Not through official channels. Those always move too slow, but through whispers that carry farther than reports ever can. Recruits who had seen her leave the operations room spoke in fragments. A gun, a sound, a look that froze the air. No one mentioned violence. Only control. The footage, when it surfaced, confirmed the same story. No raised voice, no aggression, just a clean disarmament and a man unraveling beneath the weight of his own authority. Riggs tried to bury it. He called in favors, rewrote logs, ordered the security feed deleted. But deletion leaves traces, and traces tell stories. Within 48 hours, a copy of the file reached the oversight office. The review was swift and quiet, the way the military handles embarrassment. When the panel called Mara in, she stood before them like she always did, posture straight, expression neutral. She didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. They asked questions. She answered with facts. No adjectives, no emotion. Just the truth stripped bare. Her silence did what words never could. It forced them to watch, to sit in the discomfort of a system that rewards noise until someone shows what discipline actually looks like. By the time Riggs entered the room, his uniform looked too big for him. The verdict was inevitable, relieved of command, pending psychological evaluation. The phrase sounded clinical, but everyone in that room knew what it really meant. When she stepped out of the building that evening, the wind carried the faint echo of cadence from the parade field. A few of the younger recruits stood a little straighter when she passed. Not out of fear, but respect. She didn't smile. She never did. She just walked on, letting silence do what it always had, speak louder than any victory speech ever could. The metallic click of the cleaning rod echoed softly through the armory. Mara moved with deliberate rhythm. Disassemble, wipe, reassemble, each motion measured, unhurried. The same weapon that had been pressed to her head now lay harmless in her hands, stripped of intent, reduced to what it truly was, a tool. She inspected the barrel for residue, not memory, her eyes reflecting a calm so steady it almost felt like mercy. In the sterile light, the gun gleamed clean again, as if absolved. Her voice, quiet and certain, cut through the silence. Some men think a gun gives them power. But power isn't in the weapon. It's in the one who decides when not to use it. The words weren't pride or bitterness. They were instruction, delivered to no one and to everyone. The camera of imagination lingers on her hands, the way they move with reverence, not fear. It's the kind of ritual soldiers perform when they know control begins long before the trigger. She placed the weapon back in its case, locked it, and walked toward the corridor where the recruits were assembling for inspection. Conversation dimmed as she passed. No orders, no salute, just instinct, spine straightening, eyes forward, the quiet gravity that follows real authority. She didn't acknowledge it, didn't need to. Some lessons don't have to be spoken. Outside, the sun hit the parade ground in thin, gold lines. For a moment, the air itself seemed to still again, listening, remembering the sound of her silence. What would you have done if someone pressed a gun to your head? Would you have stayed still long enough to see their fear hiding behind the noise? Or would you have swung back, let anger write the ending for you? It's easy to imagine we'd all rise with perfect control, but truth lives in those first few seconds, where instinct meets discipline and ego demands to be heard. That's where most people lose the fight before it ever starts. Mara didn't win because she was stronger. She won because she understood that chaos only rules those who argue with it. Calm isn't surrender, it's strategy. And in a world that worships reaction, silence can be the loudest kind of defiance. So, I'll ask again, what does control look like to you? The pause before the storm, or the storm itself? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story made you rethink what strength really means, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who confuses volume for power. Real control isn't loud. It's steady. It's precise, and it never needs to pull the trigger.